Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of the Pocket Aces podcast. My name is Doug. Sean, my co-host. How you doing, Sean? It's been a while since we've done an episode.
Good. Yes, I've been waiting for a while to do this.
I know. We've been waiting, and we're going to get a couple done here in rapid succession, which will be nice. So we appreciate you all tuning in out there. Some developments since the last time we were able to release an episode. You can now find us on both Apple and Google Podcasts, the Podcast Addict app, I should say. SoundCloud, I believe TuneIn Radio is another app that picked up the podcast. You can also check us out on Facebook at The Pocket Aces Podcast. So, Sean, let's just jump right into it. A couple different things to talk about today. Our main topic will be the World Series of Poker, one of the best times in gambling with the World Series going on in Vegas right now. Lot to talk about there. But as always, let's open it with some Atlantic City news. Since we last did an episode, one of the biggest things to come out of Atlantic City since our last episode was, I believe in our last episodes we talked about the company Eldorado taking over Tropicana Entertainment, being sold to Carl Icahn. Carl Icahn, ironically, takes a majority control stake in Caesars Entertainment. Eldorado then purchases Caesars Entertainment. And you and I have talked about this, Sean. Eldorado owning Caesars now gives them 4 casinos in town: Harrah's, Bally's, Caesars, and the Tropicana. So what is your opinion of one company, similar to the way Caesars was when they also had Showboat, 4 buildings? What is your opinion of having one company in town now running 4 casinos in the way that it was years ago with Caesars?
I think it's a big thing for AC because Eldorado has been successful with Tropicana. You know, they bring people in the door, so I think they can bring some fresh ideas to the other casinos and increase business.
Yeah, and one of the things that, Eldorado has done a very good job with with Tropicana, but of course they've done very well on their own with the other properties they own outside of Atlantic City. So all in all, from what I've heard, Eldorado has been doing pretty well, improving things at Tropicana. Certainly some improvements can be made at Harrah's, Bally's, and Caesars. Unfortunately, this may spell the end for Bally's. You and I have talked about this. They seemingly have stopped doing anything with Bally's. It almost seems like Bally's is kind of heading on its way out. You and I have talked on this show before about how my prediction is that by the end of 2020, so a year and a half from now, within a year and a half, Bally's will be closed. Obviously, we know you don't want to see that happen. Nah. But one of the things that was put into place before Eldorado even came up, Bally's opening a brand new sports book, and I know that's something you're really excited for. So even though you haven't seen it yet, you have to wait 2 weeks to see it. 2 weeks from when we are recording this, you'll be down there. But talk about what you're looking forward to seeing, because I know you've been sending me pictures. You've been keeping up on it. What are you looking forward to?
Oh, yeah. Well, I already booked my room. I'll be there 2 Thursdays from now. I'm just really looking forward to seeing the sports book. I've heard that it's the biggest sports book in AC, and I've seen pictures online, and it looks like kind of like a big stadium in a way with the seating and everything and the big screens. And I'm going to play some sports bets while I'm there, and also check out their beach bar because I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, Bally's Beach Bar is consistently one of the favorites every year, in addition to the Landshark Bar all the way down at resorts. And I think Hard Rock did open a beach bar last year, and I think that was that's slowly becoming very successful as well. Borgata opening a permanent sports book. They've had one for some time, as did Bally's, but Borgata's official permanent sports book opening as well. One of the things that we can also talk about, if you follow us on Facebook, if not, go ahead over and give us a like. I posted some pictures recently of a trip that I took down there, a day trip. I went down back the last week of June and went down. We talked in our previous episodes about how we were at Hard Rock and Ocean for their opening ceremonies last summer. And now 1 year later, to the day, it was literally Thursday, whatever that was, the 28th of June, I went down to celebrate the 1 year anniversary of both buildings. Ocean was doing a number of different things. Hard Rock's actual 1 year ceremonies were taking place later in the weekend, but it was cool. I actually had the ability to be there for Ocean. They did the the cake. They had the big cake. There's a picture of that cake on our Facebook page. There's a picture of the $5 1-year anniversary chips. You have one. I got you one. I brought 3 home for myself. 2 of them are actually sitting right here behind me in this display case that I have of all of my casino chips. So that was really cool. And in a way, Ocean is almost, to me, seems like they're celebrating a rebirth. Now, it's kind of interesting to say a casino is celebrating a rebirth a year after they've opened. But we've talked about it before. They have new ownership. They're doing a lot of different things. They have new elevators. They have new restaurants. They're putting in a new bar in the lobby from what I read online. The brand new 1927 Speakeasy is open. And while I didn't get to go inside, the outside area looks really cool and really nice. And I think it will do its job as a nightclub. But I think it's also going to be meant to be like a speakeasy, like back in the day. And anyone that studied up on their Atlantic City history knows that there were speakeasies all over Atlantic City during Prohibition era because obviously if you've seen the show Boardwalk Empire, it's pretty close to accurate from what I've read up on. So, a couple name changes and stuff like that. But anyway, Sean, you talked heavily about Ocean in our previous episodes. Are you excited to see them making these changes? I know you're a big proponent of Ocean. You've talked about some changes you'd like to see them make, but they are making these changes. Are you excited to see these things? Do you think it is a rebirth?
Oh, yes, of course. Just the small renovations that they're doing, like you said, with the new escalators and elevators to make it easier to access different parts of the building and building new bars and the speakeasy. I think it's a new, fresh idea for guests when they come in the door. And also, I believe they have the most popular day club in AC, HQ2.
Yes.
That's a very popular spot. I've seen pictures, and it looks really cool.
Absolutely. And one of the things that they are doing as well, on top of free parking if you have a player's card, regardless of your level of card, I know some casinos, Hard Rock in particular, you have to have one of the top tiers for free parking. Ocean offering free parking no matter what tier level you have for a card, which in a previous episode is something I said will bring people in. One thing I failed to mention a couple minutes ago, Sean, when I was down there, I texted you when we were down there that 1-year anniversary day. Ocean was busier than Hard Rock. I never in a million years thought I would see that. I don't know if it's because it just so happened that was Ocean's 1-year anniversary where they did the cake, they did the ribbon cutting and all that stuff. But I know you've said, and I finally saw it, the one time, I know you stayed there recently, when we were down there and the last time we did a show, you mentioned that their staff is very friendly and knowledgeable. I saw that firsthand. I unfortunately forgot my player's card, so I went to have one reprinted. The girl at the desk was extremely nice. She answered my question about I'm the weirdo asking where do I get one of these chips for the anniversary because I wanted one because I'm a collector. She probably looked at me like I had 3 heads, but she answered the question. She knew what I was talking about, even though I think she was just surprised to be asked. But the staff at Ocean definitely improving, and it's something that's just so cool. It's a place we both want to see that place succeed. So very, very cool. And obviously both players in the market. Hard Rock, I believe, has now surpassed, I can't remember off the top of my head who the number 2 casino in town was, possibly Tropicana. Hard Rock is now consistently the number 2 casino in Atlantic City. And obviously, when you have Borgata, we've talked about this before as well, Borgata is arguably the best casino on the East Coast, with the exception of possibly the Hard Rocks in, Florida, but we don't have to necessarily count that as East Coast. So if you're competing against the Borgata, but still the second best casino in Atlantic City after only a year of being open, that is definitely a big deal. So really cool, and it was just great to be a part of opening day and the 1-year anniversaries for those. So, Sean, anything else about Atlantic City that you want to talk about before we move on to the World Series of Poker?
No, I think I'm good.
All right, so let's move on. We've got a lot to talk about. Obviously, it is summertime, which means in Vegas, the poker world, descends on Vegas to the Rio. And obviously, not only the Rio, a lot of other casinos down there have their events this time of year as well. But the Rio hosting the World Series of Poker for a number of years. Rumor has it that in a year or two it will be moved to the new Las Vegas Convention Center. The Rio may lose it, which would be really unfortunate. But at the same time, I think their goal would be to move it to this convention center that's a little more central to the Strip. So I don't know what they're going to do, but obviously the Rio is the place to be. You were there a couple years ago. You've told your Daniel Negreanu story. And just one of my favorite times of the year, and the best part about the World Series of Poker is it's so different than it used to be even 5 years ago. You could watch an episode a week, and they were pre-recorded, and they ran from August until October, and then the November 9 was live. Before that, everything was pre-recorded. And as great as that was, it has been so great to be opened up to the ability to watch all of these events. You've got ESPN covering the main event from day one until the champion is crowned. One of the things years ago that I remember about the World Series of Poker is they would start airing day 3. But then there were a couple years where they started airing on day 5. I think it's cool now that you can see from the beginning the $25 and $100 chips are on the table. And then you can see the tournament progress to the point where they get those little frisbees that are the yellow frisbees and yellow frisbee-looking chips that are huge that are worth $1 million. So it's a great time of year with Poker Go, CBS All Access having the ability to air these events live. It's just so cool. And for someone like us who loves poker, it gives you the ability to be a part of the World Series throughout the summer. I've been tracking it. I've staked some players. We all staked Mike Matusow an event. Unfortunately, he did not make the money in that event. I staked Joe Hashem in one of his packages. One of the events he cashed in, I don't remember if it was the seniors event or the $3,000 no-limit event, but he cashed. I made like a whopping $4 back on what I had put into him, but it was cool. It gives you the ability to feel like you're there without actually being there. So, Sean, I gave you a task for today. I said, find 3 people playing in the World Series of Poker this summer, not named Hellmuth, Ivey, Negreanu, or Cata, because I know Joe Cata is a favorite of yours, and tell me some things that they did this summer. I have 3 as well, so let's go back and forth. You do your first one, I'll do one, and we'll go from there. So your first is someone who so far has done very well in the main event, but go ahead and go on to your first person who's very well known in the poker world.
All right. Well, a few years ago, I discovered this player on Poker After Dark, and he's like a top 10 player for me, and that's Antonio Esfandiari. Last year, he finished 132nd in the main event, and this year he did even better. He made it to day 6 and finished 82nd, and that's in a field of over 8,500 people, so that is very impressive.
Second largest main event of all time. Second only to, I believe they said 2006, the year Jamie Gold won.
Yeah. So I believe he's known to make deep runs like that in the main event. So
yeah, one of the things about Antonio Esfandiari as well, he's a great poker commentator, by the way. They have him on the main event broadcast, and he does a really good job. The winner of the the high, the high roller for one drop or whatever it was years ago, where he won $14 million in the one drop, the first ever one drop event. $14 million payday in one event. I think he's got $22 million earnings all time, which is one of the top all-time earnings for World Series of Poker. But that's because 14 of it was one event. That's pretty insane. And he'd already had a really good career to that point, and then to have that payday was just insane. My 3 are going to be a little more unique. You're going to have to really know, well, I'd say for 2 of them, you're going to have to really know your poker. My first one is actually going to be a Philadelphia native by the name of Mr. John Hennigan. Now, this summer he hasn't played very much, but he does have 6 total bracelets. His one bracelet that he did win is one of his events he played this year, $10,000 stud. He won the bracelet. He defeated Daniel Negreanu heads up, and I watched some of that on Poker Go. It was like a 4-hour heads up session, which to play heads up for 4 hours in poker is a long time. Now, obviously, unlike No Limit Hold'em, stud is a limit game. So you're not going to have someone coming over the top going all in for 30 million to their stack because it's just not possible because it's a limit game. But John Hennigan has won 6 bracelets. He's very well known in the poker community. He's also, like Esfandiari, known for making deep runs. Daniel Negreanu on his vlog told a story one time about how the first time he ever played against John Hennigan scared the crap out of him because of the way Hennigan played a couple hands against him when Negreanu was a kid back in the 90s. So John Hennigan is the first person that I picked this year. He's at the top of the Player of the Year standings. I believe he's in the top 10. And obviously with still plenty of time left to go in this year's World Series, as well as the World Series of Poker Europe. I don't know if Hennigan will go play, but the Player of the Year standings involving WSOP Europe as well. So plenty of time for him to potentially jump up. So, Sean, who is your number 2? Now, I know your number 2 is related to someone very well known in poker, but your number 2 is maybe not as well known as his, let's just say, the man that gave him life.
Yes, it's Joe Hashem's son, Daniel. He's been playing poker professionally for a few years now. He finished 983rd in the Crazy Eights event this year, and he made a very deep run. Actually, made it farther than his own father. He finished 79th place in the main event and made it to day 6.
Yeah, Daniel Hashem, following in the footsteps of his dad, Joe. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there like myself who were younger when Joe Hashem won the World Series of Poker. It's one of my fondest memories. It's one of my earliest poker memories, watching him on ESPN win the World Series. He won in 2005, Chris Jesus Ferguson winning. And actually, that would have been a great segue. I should have held on to that. Chris Jesus Ferguson winning in 04, Jamie Gold in 06. So a couple of really great golden years there for poker to see 3 pretty cool personalities win bracelets. And obviously, Joe Hashem, very lively. Aussie, 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 pass the sugar when he won a hand. Definitely very memorable. So I should have saved that segue because Chris Ferguson actually is, in fact, my second, of course, there's no order here, 1, 2, or 3. It's just who it is. But my second player, Chris Ferguson. And what's amazing to me about this man, despite going through what he went through with the PokerStars issue and Black Friday back at the beginning of the decade, he's managed to make a resurgence in poker. It's really awesome. He won Player of the Year a couple years ago. I'm sure if there are any big poker fans out there, or if for some reason poker pros out there hear this podcast, you may not like me to hear this because Chris's name isn't as great in the poker community as some would hope. But I've always been a fan of Chris Ferguson, regardless of what happened back with Black Friday and all of that, and PokerStars and all that stuff. This year alone, Chris Ferguson, 3 top 10 finishes, 18 cashes. 18 cashes at the World Series of Poker. To play in 18 events is more than what some people do, but to play in 18 events plus cash in 18 of them is just really insane. He's got multiple top 20s. He's got a couple final tables. Just really cool to see Chris Ferguson kind of persevering and pushing through, his public persona and still being a player in the poker community. And I'm not afraid to say it. I back him 100%. Would I ever give him money? Probably not. But, I back Chris Ferguson 100%. I'm a big fan. I've been a fan since watching him on TV win the World Series. What's funny is I'll never forget about Chris Ferguson being a kid, and my grandmother was over for something and I was watching it. And for some reason, instead of putting Ferguson under his cards, when you see it on TV, they've got the cards with the name, they put Jesus. And I'll never forget my grandmother saying, "Oh, it must be Jesus." And I'm like, "No, it's because he had long hair. He had long hair." And she goes, "Oh, he must go by Jesus." I don't know why she said that, but I said, "No, it's Jesus. That's his nickname." And that's just a memory that for some reason sticks with me about him. So Chris Ferguson, my second pick for someone to report on for this year's World Series of Poker. Again, up there in the WSOP Player of the Year standing. So, here's to Chris maybe trying to get back to Player of the Year again. I think if he were to win Player of the Year again, this would be 2 of the last 4 years or something like that, because I know it was recent. So, Sean, who is your third and final for the day?
My third one is Joe McKeon, who actually won the main event back in 2015. And then he went on 2 years later in 2017 to win the 10,000 limit Hold'em championship. And this year he only played in one event, came in 65th in the Million Maker. I actually saw an article that said he might be considered one of the best in big event play, meaning in the big events like the main event, and like the limit hold'em championship. He goes very far.
Yeah. High buy-in events, $10,000 plus and whatnot. Yeah. Joe McKeon, like John Hennigan, a Philadelphia native. I believe he actually wore a Sixers jersey when he won the main event, and throughout that tournament wore Flyers shirts, wore Eagles, Phillies. I remember him wearing one time. And Josh Beckley, who we actually played heads up in that main event, also a Philadelphia native. So possibly, I think for the first time ever, absolutely for the first time ever, two people from the Philadelphia area. And I think that goes to show you how well poker has taken on in this area where we are, Philadelphia, Atlantic City, New Jersey, because you can go over to Philadelphia and play at Parks or Sugar House. You can go to Atlantic City. And obviously Scott Blumstein, who won, I believe, in 2016, the next year, because I believe Qui Win was 2017, right? And then John Sin was 2018 last year. So 2 years in a row, guys from the New Jersey, Philadelphia area winning the World Series of Poker main event really goes to show you how there's kind of like this poker renaissance in our area, I guess. Unfortunately for casual players like us, it just means we have to play tougher players when we go to Borgata, but nonetheless. So Joe McKeon, a favorite of mine as well. I believe he won a ring at the circuit event in Atlantic City at Harrah's this year. And after I saw that, I actually put something on Twitter that said, you really need to start considering him as one of the best poker players of all time. He kind of slides in under the radar, but you're right. He does really well in not the high roller events. $10,000 isn't really high roller, but he definitely does well in those upper echelon of buy-in events. So another great choice. Anything else on Joe?
I actually noticed when I was watching the main event final table in 2015, one of his best strong suits, I believe, is nobody can get a read on him. He just keeps a straight face the whole time, and he's actually able to get reads on other people. Like when I'm sitting there watching from home, I'm like, I could never read these people, but he could tell when someone's bluffing, and he knows when to raise. Even with nothing, he still wins hands.
Yeah, and I remember with that run that he had in 2015, that was one of his strong suits, winning hands, whether it was at the final table, whether it was heads up with Josh Beckley. I remember him winning hands he had no business winning. I remember there was one hand, I don't remember what he had specifically, but he literally had nothing and bullied Josh Beckley off the hand. And it was crazy. And Joe McKeon gives you that, not the Ivy stare, but he definitely has this look in his face and his eyes where you're not getting anything off of him. So absolutely a great choice there, Sean. My number 3 is going to be the grinder, Michael Mizrachi. This year, a very good year so far this summer, 5 cashes. He does have 1 bracelet in the 1500 stud high-low event. To be honest with you, I'm trying to learn some of these newer games. I've been a limit player. I've been a hold'em player with the occasional stud. But these, Omaha high-low, deuce to 7 triple draw have actually really kind of drawn me in this year. But that's a story for another day. The bracelet in the $1,500 stud high-low, his 5th bracelet. I believe this is either the 3rd or 4th year in a row Mizrachi has won a bracelet at the World Series, which goes to show you just how impressive that is. To come to the World Series, win a bracelet, at least 1 bracelet each year, and I believe he's in the top 20 or 25 names for the Player of the Year as well. And certainly after 5 cashes and a bracelet, that is really good compared to what other people out there are doing. So the grinder, always been a fan favorite of mine. I remember seeing him on TV years ago win the Poker Players Championship, the $50,000 tournament, which he has won 3 times, I believe. And then also there was that memorable hand. I don't remember if it was in the main event a couple years ago where I believe, if I remember correctly, he had kings against aces all in, and on the flop there was a king, and he got really excited. On the turn, there was an ace. And literally, I remember watching, he had this really cool, yeah expression on his face. And then literally, he almost, sunk to the floor because there was the ace, and that was it for him. I think that was during his main event run a couple years ago. A very memorable hand that I remember. So, Michael Mizrachi, the grinder, as they call him, my 3rd and final player as well. So, Sean, I believe we both have a favorite moment that we want to go over at the World Series of Poker. Let's do that, and then let's talk a little bit about Danny Negreanu. since we both have some things to say about him because he is our favorite.
My favorite event happened on day 3. It's actually considered the bloodbath hand. I found articles online about it, and that's what people are calling it. One player actually won $723,000 in chips from that hand. Pre-flop, this player, Joseph Beasy, had pocket 10s. Simon Welsh had ace 9, and Joshua Tam had pocket 7s. The flop came out 10 ace 7. So one player had trip 7s, the other one trip 10s, and then Welsh had a pair of aces. So long story short, Welsh ended up folding with just the aces. The turn and the river come out 4 on the turn and 4 on the river. So both Tam and Beasy had full houses. So just the pot kept growing because they kept re-raising. And then eventually, I believe it was Beasy that won.
Yes,
it
was.
Beasy won that hand. $723,000 in one hand.
Yep, it was insane, and I've seen the clip as well. And I remember, and one of the broadcasters, I don't remember if it was Lon McCarron or Norman Chad or whoever was sitting in with them, made a great point. Tam threw his cards over, thought he had it, and then just the expression of "oh my God" on his face when Beasley turned over the better full house. It's just that is definitely a bad beat. Me as well. One of my favorite moments so far this year was in a non-Hold'em event actually, and it was really talked about. And I honestly think these are probably the top 2 bad beats of the summer. And I think mine was Until Yours, because originally a lot of people were calling mine one of the worst in televised poker, Until Yours, just because of how insane yours was. But I think that the percentages to win in this one that I'm going to talk about were just greater. So anyway, in the Poker Players Championship, I believe it was deuce to 7 triple draw. Josh Aria ended up making a deuce to 7 wheel, which is 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. And Bryce Yockey had 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, which is the second best hand you can have. He was actually dealt that hand, so he didn't have to take cards. I mean, Sean, when you play 5-card draw, what do? You keep cards, you turn it away. It's the same exact thing, except the hands are different. Bryce Yockey got the second best hand, and he had Pat. It's called Pat number 2. Josh Aria had 4, 5, 6 or something. 4, 5, 6 queen or something like that. He took a draw and had a better hand, took another draw and had another hand, and then finally, I think the last card, I don't remember off the top of my head what it was. I may be able to find it here. The last card that he ended up getting was, so it was 3, 5, 6 he was dealt, and then he made a straight 6, which means he went 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 after the second one. So he threw the 6 in and needed a 7. If he got anything other than a 7, he was going to lose the hand. If he got an 8, they would have pushed, or not pushed, that's blackjack. They would have chopped. Anything else, he would have lost. He needed one card to make the better hand, and he did. So literally, in 3 draws, he went from nothing to better to the winning hand. And it was absolutely sick. And Nick Schulman and Ali Najad were calling it. It's actually on PokerGo. I remember watching it. I didn't watch it live. I went back and watched it after I saw the clip. The reaction when the TV monitor shows the 7 pop up. The two of them literally in the same exact time go, "Oh my God," because they couldn't believe it. It was absolutely insane. Bryce Yockey thinks he's got the best hand. Pat, I'm like, come on, you've got the second best hand. How could you lose? This guy just keeps drawing and finally on the third draw, and then the guy made a wheel. It was just anyone out there that knows the game better than we do, or because deuce to 7 triple draw is something I'm just starting to learn. But anyway, needless to say, all you need to know is that 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 is the best hand, and he somehow did it in the 3 draws that he had. It was just absolutely sick. So that's my favorite moment so far. Obviously, still a lot of time to go. There's multiple other events to play, including the main event. So, Sean, real quick before we move on here to our secondary topic, Danny Negreanu one of our favorite poker players. Obviously, he wasn't in the list of the people that we brought with us, but certainly we could take some time to talk about him. A really good summer. I remember you and I talking about it before. The very first event he played this year, he actually made the final table for. It was really cool. It was the $10,000 Super Turbo Bounty, which, for those of you out there who may not know, bounty tournament is when you knock somebody out, they give you a special chip. That chip is worth X amount of money. So even if you bust, let's say the chip is worth $500. If you bust out of the tournament and you have at least one chip, you'll get $500 in cash. You turn that in for cash. In these, sometimes if you play a bounty tournament and it's $1,500 buy-in, if you knock 3 people out, you made your buy-in back. So he played that. It's also super turbo, which means the levels are shorter. But the very first event of the year he played, which was like event number 2, it was literally, I believe, the employees event was number 1. The second event of the summer, he came in 6th place, making the final table. And we're both big fans, Sean. So talk about what you see here from Danny throughout the summer. He's got that 6th place finish. He's got a 2nd place finish in that event that he lost to John Hennigan, 5th place at the Raz. So, 3 final tables, a multitude of cashes. You could probably say this has been his best summer in a couple of years. What do you like to see out of Danny? What have you liked to see so far from him? What have you enjoyed in terms of what you've seen from him this summer?
Oh, just his success in the smaller in the smaller events. I'm sorry. Getting to the final tables, as you said multiple times. It's hard to see him bust out early in the main event. That's one event I would like to see him get to the final table, which I know is the odds are insurmountable because insane. It's the biggest field ever. Yeah. Over 8,500 people. But it is cool to see him go far in the smaller events. And I actually, as you guys know from the previous podcast, I actually saw him play in, I believe it was the Players' Championship.
Yes, it was Poker Players Championship 2017.
2017. I'm not sure if it was the final table that I was watching.
I don't think he made the final table. I think it was like the final 3 though. Because you were in, you told me you walked to the area, and I think they were down to the final 3 tables, I believe. So, yeah, definitely I agree. I mean, if you look at these numbers here, $600 pot limit Omaha, $3,000 no limit hold'em, $1,000 double stack, $600 online, $1,500. Like, he definitely did very well. I mean, and again, there's a couple of $10,000 cashes here as well. Doing very well in the mid-range events. Obviously, one of the big stories prior to the beginning of the summer, Negreanu doing the packages where you could buy in, you could stake him for low-level, mid-level, and high-level packages. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get in on it because they sold out in like 10 minutes. I got on like 30 minutes later and it was already sold before they went on sale. So unfortunately we didn't get in on that, but doing very well. And I mean, definitely, I don't know if it's because he got married this summer, he's got less on his mind. I don't know, but definitely one of the best years. I mean, take a look at this, Sean. 2018, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cashes in 2018 wow. Out of, I mean, granted, I think he said in his vlogs he's playing more events this year than he did, but even if you're only playing a couple more, he already so let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So by event number 34 this year, he had already surpassed the number of cashes that he had this year. To the point now where this year, I should say, to catch my words, he has more than double the amount of cashes this year than he did last year. And the World Series of Poker isn't even over yet. So just an awesome summer for Danny Negreanu. It's so awesome to see. I would love to go out there. It would be cool to get a picture with him like you did. Mm-hmm. But just to be able to sit there and watch him live would be so cool and would just be something I'd love to do. And in all honesty, we're talking about potentially going to Vegas next year just because never been. I really want to go. I would only go during the World Series. Like, oh, yeah, I wouldn't be able, it wouldn't be right for me to, I wouldn't feel right going to Vegas for the first time in October because it would have to be during the World Series. I love the World Series so much, I'd have to. So, just a lot of fun. It's been so cool to watch this year. And, if you want to get the Poker Go subscription out there, people, if you like the World Series, if you like to watch poker, just do the 10 months. I did the subscription for $10 a month. I did June and July. At the end of this month, I'm going to cancel the subscription. That's $20 to watch all the final tables and get as much poker as you possibly can. I haven't even been able to watch everything, but to have the event replays and everything is so cool. So we're getting down to the end of the World Series, so almost another year in the books, and unfortunately it's sad when the World Series comes to an end, but it's a fun 6 to 7 weeks while they do that. So
especially
Sean,
with it being at the 50th anniversary.
Absolutely. And one of the things, Sean, you know this, I collect the decks of cards. I have, I believe, 16, 17, I do. I have 16, 17, and 18. The 19 cards have a special little 50th anniversary logo on it. As soon as they become available, I'm going to buy that. Because not only do I collect casino chips, but I am starting to collect setups of both the red and black decks from the World Series because they're made by Copag. They feel awesome. It's so cool to know that you're not playing with the actual cards that they used at the World Series. You're just playing with the leftover decks. But it is cool to be able to have those and physically play with those. They're the best cards out there in my opinion. So Sean, really quick, just to move on to our secondary topic, since we are going to not only talk poker and gambling, well, this is gambling, sports betting. And obviously as the summer progresses, we get closer to football, basketball, hockey. I mean, obviously we could sit here and talk about baseball, but there's only so much you can do with that. It'll be cool in the fall to do episodes where we could record an episode during the week and literally talk about each NFL game that week. I'm really looking forward to that. But just for now, let's look at some of the futures odds for the NFL. These are part of, this is through sportsline.com. These are actually provided by Westgate. So these are just the odds. I mean, certainly if you want me to, Sean, I can pull up the DraftKings odds since I use DraftKings pretty regularly. But so far, not a surprise to see who's at the top overall. Kansas City and New England tied for the best odds to win the Super Bowl this year at 6-1. I don't know why this is surprising to me given they got to the Super Bowl last year, but just whenever I see the Rams, it just surprises me to see them up that high, even though it really shouldn't. They are sitting at 8-1, as well as New Orleans. Now, it's really funny, Sean, is I swear every year I decide to take the Saints to win the Super Bowl, like they don't make the playoffs. Like it's incredible. And like the one time I don't even remember what it was. I think it was like a pool that I did among friends. I took the Patriots to win the Super Bowl, and it was like one of the years they didn't even make it to the Super Bowl. So like I'm kind of like superstitious. Like I'm weird. I love to see the Patriots win. They're the bad guys. I always root for the bad guy. So I feel like if I were to bet on them this year, they wouldn't win. So it's just really bizarre. So I probably will avoid that. But you got the Colts at 12-1, Chicago 14-1. So and see, Sean, I see you're pulling out some of your fantasy football stuff here. So what's your opinion on some of these early odds to come out of football as it's early July, late June, early July right now. We're about a month away from camp, little more than a month away from the first preseason game. So what do you see here? What's your opinion of some of these?
The Patriots I don't agree with. I always find that they're always at the top of the odds charts. And that's because when it comes to postseason time, they kind of turn it up. But I think just Brady is getting to that point in his career where he's kind of getting older, so his performance is kind of decreasing a bit. Plus, they don't have Rob Gronkowski anymore. He retired after the Super Bowl. I actually think you should bet on the Saints again this year because I believe their running attack is going to be really good. Their offense is going to be good. Drew Brees may be getting older, but I think Alvin Kamara might have a breakout year. He's actually in my fantasy magazine here. He's ranked third overall of all running backs. So,
well, you have one of the leagues that you're in, and this is something we can talk about come the fall as well, fantasy football. You are 9th in that league. Now, not to give away your secrets to the people in that league, but who are you thinking of? I didn't ask you this. How many teams in the league? So you are 9 out of
12.
Out of 12. Okay, so you're in the bottom part. Who are you looking at so far early on? Since your draft actually isn't all that far away. It's, a month away or so?
Yes, it's It's
Actually,
mid-August.
We're close to the middle. We're almost in the middle of July.
Yeah,
now,
it's mid-August. I think it's August 18th. The draft is. I haven't really been thinking about too much, but I always go running back in the first round. And it's funny, my one cousin makes fun of me for this, but sometimes I won't go by the next best available player on the cheat sheet. Sometimes I'll reach. And actually, just a few days ago when we decided the random draft order, my uncle texted me and said, it's okay to reach. It's always your decision on who you think is best for your team.
Yeah.
So in my position, I think the next running back to go for would be James Conner or Joe Mixon. Although Joe Mixon I don't really trust because he's on the Bengals. But James Conner being on the Steelers, I can trust that because especially since Antonio Brown is on the Raiders now. So they might use the run game a lot more.
Yeah, and I feel like whenever you bring the Steelers into this discussion, despite how you feel about them and the way they, compete in the playoffs, I feel like every year they at least have a couple players in the top echelon. There's always someone on the Steelers that's getting talked about at the end of the season for the season that they had. They may not do well in the playoffs, but they have players who I feel like there's always someone in the discussion. Even if it's Big Ben. I remember Big Ben sometimes ends up in the discussion. Even if is Big Ben going to make the Pro Bowl? He somehow ends up in the discussion.
Mm-hmm.
So, a couple of other really funny things here. Obviously, we're in the Philadelphia area. Sean, their showing is 14-1. I'm sure if you ask anybody in the Philadelphia area, they'll take that. I wouldn't, just because, let's be honest, it is the Eagles after all. It's just so weird to see Cleveland right below them at 16-1. We're so used to seeing Cleveland at the bottom at 500-1 and whatnot. But, some of these other ones here, at this point, Miami 500-1, Arizona 200-1. You don't even need to talk about them. I can't even see anybody here. I mean, Atlanta maybe at 30-1, Seattle at 25-1, or someone I would maybe consider taking as a long shot. Maybe not to win the Super Bowl, but maybe just to win the conference. So, and obviously as the summer goes on, these will update. We'll check in on these. And then, like I said, Sean, I can't wait for the fall to come around because we could literally sit here and do an entire podcast on the week ahead in football. We could sit here and record a podcast on Monday or Tuesday and talk about the next week 4 it's going to be
fantasy football matchups.
Fantasy football matchups. We can go over lines, spreads, all that stuff. It's going to be really cool. Let's jump over to the NHL real quick just because we are both hockey fans as well. Obviously, my heart wants me to go with the Philadelphia Flyers, going off at 40-1. I believe last year they were 42-1 because I did bet on them. Or actually, no, I think they were lower than that. It was like 20-1 because I bet $2 on them and I would have won $42 if they won the cup. We all know they're not going to. But ironically, Sean, to see, obviously you're happy about Vegas.
Yes.
Vegas is second best at 7-1. I get it, Vegas. Tampa Bay makes sense. They had a really good campaign last year, but I don't know. It almost seems too easy to pick Tampa. It's almost like Vegas wants you to pick Tampa, and then they know they're going to just crap out. I mean, to have one of the best seasons in the history of the NHL and then get swept out of the first round by the lowest seed in the conference, absolutely sick. And it was cool because I was happy to see it. As I love the game. Hockey is my life. It's my bread and butter. And I love to see stuff like that. They talked about Tampa Bay, everything like that, to get swept out was beautiful. What was even better was Pittsburgh getting swept out as well in the first round. So you're happy to see Vegas. Colorado at 10-1, tied with Toronto also at 10-1 for the third best odds. Colorado is one of those teams that I've always been a fan of. Certainly someone that you could take. I mean, there are a couple teams in here that you really can't leave out in the middle of the pack. Nashville 20-1, Calgary 20-1. St. Louis, who won the Stanley Cup, 16-1. Really odd to see the Stanley Cup winning team 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 from the ninth best odds to win the Stanley Cup, and they won it last year. You almost never see that. But, the Capitals 20-1. I don't know how Arizona is 30-1, but, whatever. It is what it is. New Jersey 30-1. Obviously they just had the number 1 pick in the draft, so that's going to help them. But, nonetheless, Sean, we all know who you would like to see. than Vegas Golden Knights right there. So obviously we've got a long ways to go. That's something we can touch on as well come the fall. We can talk about hockey and lines and odds and stuff like that. So I think that's going to do it for us here for another episode of the Pocket Aces podcast. So as I said, go ahead, check us out. Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, the Podcast Addict app. In our next episode, Sean, we're just going to sit down and watch poker. We're going to literally sit down for an hour, watch the main event, and talk about it as it goes on. We'll talk poker strategy. We'll talk about what would we as, of course, we're not there, but what would we do in a certain situation? It's going to be fun. It's going to be cool to just sit and watch poker and talk about it for an hour, 45 minutes, whatever it ends up being. And then episode 5, Sean, which I'm even more looking forward to, will be live. We are going to somehow try to air it live on Facebook Live. I don't know how we're going to do it. We are going to be live from a balcony suite at the Hard Rock in Atlantic City. I am really looking forward to that. We're going down, group of us going down for the weekend. We're getting in early, so we're going to do a live podcast from the Hard Rock in Atlantic City. We may even take the podcast out onto the balcony if it's unlocked. So we'll see what we'll see what lies ahead for us. So 2 episodes will be coming up shortly. We appreciate you tuning in here, and we hope to see you next time.